All right. And all right. And I think we're ready to go live, or go on the audio too. Here we go. We'll go 3, 2, and 1. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Persuasion by the Pint. I'm Jonathan Taylor, along with
Sean McCool.
And Sean, today we're going to be talking about the power of persuasion as it relates to the theater of politics, showmanship, and some other things. I said some other things because I don't even know what to say. I just said some other things. So
yeah, so it's kind of one of those random flights of persuasion show where amazing gold nuggets come out.
That's right.
Even when we're not expecting it. But
right.
it's interesting you chose politics. Is there something going on that we should be aware of? Or
let's see. What's been going on in the last 2 weeks? Let me think. There's two parties, and they have this convention that they do every 4 years. I don't know what it's about. It's something about a presidential thing.
Yes.
Something about it's a prelude to something that happens in November. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's coming back to me now. So, right. So we're not talking keg parties. We're talking political parties.
Well, never mind.
Yeah, it depends on the crowd for sure.
That's right. So we're going to be talking a little bit of showmanship and just some theater. We're not going to get in, obviously. This is a political show, but we are going to look at some aspects of persuasion from a visual standpoint. And there's a lot of visual takeaways from the theater. And I think politics is really ultimately theater. If you can kind of break yourself away from the opposition on the two sides, I mean, that's a debate all day long. But if you can look at just the visual theater, there was some interesting feedback and some interesting takeaways from both sides, from maybe the DNC last week and then the RNC this week. So we'll touch on that and get into just what persuades people and ultimately to make decisions. We always think it's the politics, but a lot of the polling and a lot of the science of, after elections, the feedback that you get shows otherwise. What we think people actually buy into is not reality, because as we know, people are irrational when it comes to making decisions. So
absolutely. And we're going to pull from a couple of different sources, and we got some cool ideas that I think everybody at this point who's a regular listener knows which side we're on.
Sure.
So we're obviously going to be biased towards that side, but at the same time, we try to step back and
we'll be fair,
and we'll be fair and balanced.
That's right.
So we'll be as fair and balanced as we want to be. So
absolutely. It's our show. We can take it wherever we want to go. All right.
Exactly. So speaking of taking wherever we want to go, let's talk about some beer.
All right. Well, let's get into this segment, which is sponsored by the Original Craft Beer Club. And so we'll be dipping into our beer of the week. Sean, you've got one of the Original Craft Beer Club selections ready to go.
I do indeed.
And so this segment is brought to you by Craft Beer Club, outstanding craft beers from the finest independent microbreweries in the U.S. of A. Craft beers have exploded in popularity over the past decade. One of the best ways to sample all of these beers coming from all of these different microbreweries across the U.S., and there's like so many of them, but one of the best ways is to get on board with the Original Craft Beer Club, because what they let you do is they do all the legwork, and they send them straight to you, so you can kind of sample and get the flavor for what some of these microbrews across the U.S. are cooking up. And some you're going to like, and you're probably going to say, wait a minute, that was really good. Where can I find this one at? So, and you can find, I didn't mention the website on the last episode, but it is persuasionbythepint.com/craft beer. If you want to sign up or you want to learn more about their program, they do monthly, bi-monthly. So you can really kind of choose which way you want to go there, depending on your taste.
Absolutely. So yeah, I've got the old It's pretty cool. They send you the microbrew newsletter sheets. So you get 4 brews a month and 3 of each. And then they send you a little write-up. So it's 2 brews, at least this month, it was 2 brews from 2 different brewing companies, right? So 4 total. Sure. So today I'm breaking into the old Potosi. And I don't know if I'm saying that right or not. Potosi Brewing Company out of Potosi. It could be Potosi. I don't know. Wisconsin. I've never been to Wisconsin. I don't talk like a Wisconsin, so I don't know if I'm saying that right or not. But world-class craft beers, a historic brewery museum, and celebrated brew pub and restaurant. So today I am having a good old Potosi.
Potosi.
Good old Potosi. It's a golden ale. It's barely beer at 4.5% ABV. It's almost non-alcoholic at that point, in my opinion. Sounds like it's probably super dry at 15 IBUs. No bitterness there really much at all. But here's cool. This is a Beer Advocate gives this 94 points.
Oh, wow.
And one of the other ones is 92 points and a gold medal. So I've got kind of high expectations for this one. So let me read a little bit about it. Okay. The good old Potosi is a golden ale with delicate malt flavors and a slightly sweet finish, golden in color, light in body, and full in flavor. The good old Potosi is the flagship beer of the Potosi Brewing Company. When locals ask for it, they say, "I'll have a Potosi." They probably don't say it like that. They probably say, let's see if I can do a Wisconsin accent. How do you do a Wisconsin accent? I'll have a Potosi. Potosi. Hey, Jim, give me a Potosi. That was more like Central PA right there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
This beer is an easy drinking session ale and an excellent representation of the golden ale style. Enjoy. Right. So while you're talking, I'm going to pour. Tell me about
nice slab of cheese with that.
Some cheese curds. Some squeaky little cheese curds.
Yeah.
Have you had cheese curds?
I'm not a big cheese curd fan. No.
Yeah, they're weird. Like the texture is just like they squeak when you eat them. It's kind of weird. I don't really like that. I'd rather have like some good old Southern fried chicken livers or something.
That's right. Cheese curds just don't. Just the name, if I were going to try to sell people on something, I would just at least change the name curds. That just.
Would you prefer chitlins?
Yes, I actually would prefer chitlins.
Really? Wow.
Mainly because I grew up in the South, right?
I was going to say you are from Georgia. If you prefer chitlins over curds, and if you don't know what chitlins are, you should look it up.
That's right.
We'll leave the suspense there, but. Go look up chitlins.
If you're above the Mason-Dixon, you will have to Google what chitlins are.
How do you prefer your chitlins? Fried, boiled?
Well, I haven't had them that often, but fried is the preferred if I'm going to eat them. Yeah, they've got to be fried.
Yeah, definitely fried because you cannot eat that stuff. Yeah.
It's like chicken livers for me, which chicken livers are better, but if I'm gonna have to eat chicken liver or liver, it's got to be fried. So that helps to offset a little bit of the taste.
Yeah. So here's the golden ale. Definitely a little more golden than the last.
Sure. Oh yeah, that is.
So what do you got over there?
Okay, so I have a beer from this brewery a couple of weeks back. It is another Saint Bernardus, and this one is a Saint Bernardus. It's a wit.
Oh, look at that can. Is that like a shorty?
Yeah, it is a shorty.
Yeah,
it is a shorty. And it's even got the little logo, the Saint Bernardus logo. Like, because a couple of weeks ago it was like I had the massive bottle, so I've gone from their massive bottle of beer down to one of these shorty cans.
Yeah.
But this is a white. Let me see. This is a white. Is it a white ale? It just says white beer. It is a white. Yeah, it's a Belgium white beer. Traditional, unfiltered Belgian white beer. It was developed in collaboration with Pierre Salis. Everybody knows who that is.
Absolutely.
He's the legendary master brewer who founded the Hogarden Brewery, and everybody knows where that is, brewing their signature beer that was the driver of the resurgence of white beer in the 1950s. So there's a little trivia on my end. I didn't even need a sheet.
Yeah, we can save that trivia for next week then. Next episode.
So we'll see. I'm guessing, even before I pour this, a white beer is going to be really light, right?
Or it's going to be super cloudy. A lot of those Belgian beers are like really cloudy. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes out.
All right, take a look. Yeah, it's really cloudy, and it's got a huge. Of course, I didn't pour that exactly right, but
yeah, it's kind of a rushed pour there.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's good we don't have many visual watchers. They would be
criticized. Yeah, we have all sorts of criticisms coming our way for.
Where did you learn to pour beer? Georgia?
Well, listen, we're trying to monitor controls over here, and
I know it's like
keyboards and all this stuff. We got all this equipment.
So try not to hit the mic while you're pouring, and like not get on the keyboard and the books that are laying around. Like it's chaos.
All right, so this is 5.5% ABV.
Okay.
Shelf life is 2 years. That's it. 2 years.
I didn't even know. Wow, I didn't even know that was a metric on beer. I thought beer went bad in
they give you all the details. Now, here's the interesting thing: if you buy a keg of this, the shelf life is only a year.
Huh.
So you better drink that keg down real fast.
I thought it'd be the opposite. I thought the CO2 would maybe do something to it. I don't know. Guess I was wrong.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's give it a swig.
All right.
A simultaneous swig instead of sip.
Oh, come on. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, I think we need to come up with our simultaneous swig, like Scott Adams.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a
all right.
Swig.
I'm gonna have to take another swig.
Weren't paying attention.
No, I just didn't. I thought maybe a second one might help.
It's not a good sign.
No.
Yeah.
All right. I'll let you go first because I'm going to be really harsh.
So, wow. Like, I don't know who's judging these. It's got a 94 and a 92 plus a gold medal.
Right.
I guess in its class, maybe, I don't know, golden ale class. Maybe it's great. Again, I'm just not a light beer fan, like a lighter beer fan. I like the darker stuff. I like the stuff with more flavor. Mm-hmm. I will say it's pretty dry. Like there's just not a lot of going on, period, which kind of seems to defeat the purpose to me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give this a solid 2.
Wow.
Yeah. Not great.
So
far I'm striking out on a lot of the, on our sponsors this month's orders, but I think that's because we're in August. But I tell you what, it is letting me know, like it's really letting me know what types of beers I do like.
Yeah.
So even though, and I do enjoy trying them, but yeah, it makes me more and more a fan of my porters and stouts, and maybe some red ales and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, 2. 2 out of 5.
2 out of 5. Not great. So hopefully your package or the box that you got, you're clearing out the out the worst ones, and you're getting to the best ones here.
Well, worst case, these become great guest beers with a lot of story. So I can like hand these off, and they're, it's like, hey, do you know the backstory? This is from Wisconsin. I had this imported in just for you.
That's right. Exactly.
They're like, wow, that's cool.
It is. We think about it. It is all about preference. So what's what's, one man's, what did they say? One man's trash is another man's treasure. So
Yep.
not all beer drinkers are the same. Everybody's got their own preference, but, our tastes tend towards, like you said, towards the darker, porters and even the darker ales or the red ales or even the lagers. These light beers, they're kind of iffy sometimes.
Yeah, I don't have the palate to like really be able to judge just on the type of beer. Like I'm not that skilled at beer tasting.
Yeah.
So I'm probably doing a disservice. So if you like a golden ale, it's probably pretty good. It definitely doesn't like hit me like awful. It's just not my style. So what's your score there for
this one's really flat. I mean, in terms of the taste. So I'm probably going to give this one like a 1.5. Just not now. The one that I had a couple of weeks ago, that was actually really good. I gave it a pretty solid score. But this one, not so much. This white ale, it's kind of flat on the taste. So really not a whole lot of depth, no aftertaste. It's really light. So I don't know. I can't give it anything more than a 1.5 maybe.
All right. Well, let's move on to some persuasion then.
That's right.
Since the beers were kind of womp womp womp.
Yeah. I was looking for my sound. My sound. I used to have a sound card on here that was like, wah, wah, but I think I replaced it with something else. No, that doesn't do it.
That's not it. No. That's the joke button. We haven't used that one much either.
All right, so let's move on. Let's get into persuasion, charisma, showmanship, all of that.
I like it.
So P.T. Barnum, I don't know if you've ever read any of his biography. I got a biography of P.T. Barnum, and there's knocks against him, and it really correlates into politics. Mm-hmm. He was a salesman. He was a showman.
Yep.
Okay. But he was also deemed as someone who was just, kind of that salesman that's kind of cheesy, showmanship. He went over the top. Yeah. But the bottom line is he entertained people.
Right.
And entertainment is what it's like. We've talked, people would rather be entertained than educated. I've used that line a few times before. And that's the whole point is in education. If you're teaching somebody something, or if you're educating somebody something, if you can combine entertainment with education, then you've hit it. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head.
Absolutely.
P.T. Barnum was all about entertaining, regardless of what people thought about him, regardless of whether they thought he was crass, which, that was the label for him. Mm-hmm. But he entertained, and the bottom line is he brought people into the circuses, he brought people into the shows, and he made a lot of money on it. So the reason I use that example is that Trump gets labeled the same thing. He's a con man. He's he's just nothing but a used car salesman. He's a snake oil salesman, blah, blah, blah. Guess what? No one cares at the end of the day, because if you entertain people, which that's what we're going to get into in this topic, was talking about the two conventions, last week's convention, this week's convention. If you entertain people and you give them something in terms of showmanship and show them, they can be entertained, and they can be, you bring out you overdo everything just like he does. I mean, that's just his motto. Yeah. And that persuades, regardless of what you think. You may be turned off by it, but at the end of the day, people are mesmerized and they're persuaded when you have a lot going. It was like one thing after another, and I didn't watch all of them. I didn't even watch his speech, but I have to say, from an entertaining standpoint, some of the guests and some of the speeches that were given were entertaining this past week.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think they did a good job. The RNC did a good job of just rolling in different footage, and the backstories they did on some of the guest speakers and things like that were good. I mean, DNC did that as well. But,
absolutely.
You know, but, you know, honestly, these were, I don't want to say, I don't want to say, they were, 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 I told my daughter, she's 19, and I was like, basically these were pep rallies for their own schools, right? Like you're probably not persuading anybody new in these. There may be a very small margin of people, undecideds that might flip or things like that. But I think for the most part, you are rallying the base. You're doing a pep rally for the people who are already, fans.
Yeah.
So because of that, you do want to take a little bit of entertaining. You want to take some jabs at the other side. You want to really dive into the core beliefs. And, we've said that, probably 50 times on this show, at least. It's like, people want to be encouraged that their current worldview is correct. Like that's what people want. They don't want to be convinced of the other side. Which kind of goes like with our last guest, he was talking about, ask people about themselves and their brain lights up as they talk.
Right.
So when you talk about what they already believe, you're kind of tapping into that since you don't have an actual back and forth for people. You're tapping into that head nodding. Yes. Yeah. That's what I believe. So whether you're super progressive and liberal and you think the country's in shambles and it needs a whole new form of government, or whether you're on the other side and says America's the greatest country in the world and you want to see that stay that way, whichever side you're on, you believe that side. And those, I think both conventions did a pretty good job of talking to that crowd. I don't think anybody, I think there's people that think the conventions are there to persuade people and shift people. I don't think that's realistic. And I don't think it's a nice side effect if it happens, but it's more to rally the troops.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you typically see what typically happens typically after most conventions, you'll see the opposing, you'll see one candidate after their convention, their poll numbers will peak up.
Get the bump.
They'll get a bump in there. And that's typically just an enthusiasm bump. And that comes, like you said, from typically a lot of the base being more enthused or excited or kind of re-energized after the, after their convention. So those are expected, but what happened is those numbers or those polling numbers tend to trickle back down afterward. It's kind of a slight bump, and then things start to level out, and then you have kind of the I guess what they say is the final lap with the debates, all the way into I guess November, up until November. I guess there's 3 debates, and then that's the final lap until the decision is made. But yeah, I think that I'm like you. I think from a persuasive standpoint, not a lot of people are persuaded from the other side from either convention. But what happens is they're playing to their own. Typically, they're playing to their own base. They're enthusing their own base. Enthusing, is that a word? Enthusing?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll call it enthusing. We'll make up a word.
Yeah.
They're getting their own base enthusiastic about them. And I think both candidates probably did that. Although I have to say from the standpoint of the electricity, I think Trump, being a master persuader and a showman like he is, he was able to do some things that is typical Trump style. And from a marketing standpoint, I thought were pretty brilliant, obviously using the White House as a platform.
Yeah, that was a nice touch. And that was nice because the other side can't do that, right? Like that's an incumbent advantage.
Sure.
To be able to have the White House as the backdrop is pretty powerful. There's a lot of psychology in that.
It's like Paidini's authority. You're basically using the influence tactic of authority.
Yep.
And that's a perfect example. You have that background of the White House automatically. I mean, people just, they look at that and that gives you a significant advantage as opposed to somebody who can't use that. So
yeah, it was interesting. Like, a couple of the guests I know, like not last night, but the night before, they were like, you know, President Trump when he's in the Oval Office, right over there. I mean, that's like powerful. Like,
Sure.
oh, this is the guy that lives here. And then last night, which is the final night, Ivanka Trump, she was talking. She did the introduction for President Trump, and she's standing there on the front of the White House with the balcony and the columns, and it is a gorgeous building. Like,
yeah,
it has a lot of history, a lot of power, and things like that. Whether you want it or not, it's already engraved in most people's minds. So when they're standing out there doing that with all the flags in the background, the colors, all that kind of stuff, and I think they did a really good job using the live audience there on the final like hour each night of having the live audience. I thought was a good, a little bit different. Sometimes it came off a little cheesy, I thought, because it wasn't a full convention center.
Yeah.
So some of the chants felt a little weak, but things like that. But that's just kind of the time we're in. Yeah. It was nice to at least try to get the live engagement, be able to pan a crowd, those kind of things.
Yeah.
But it was definitely more for the base for sure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that one takeaway, using that platform authority, total psychology of persuasion tactic right there.
And it's something your opponent can't match.
Can't, no.
Right? Because you're in the White House right now. So that was a great tool to actually use that. And they could have just totally skipped that, stayed inside.
Yeah.
But to use that stage was a good move, I thought.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing. And I wonder, it makes me think, is that one of the reasons why a lot of incumbents typically win second terms? I mean, you've seen it. I mean, it's been pretty steady outside of a few candidates over the last 40 years that the incumbent usually wins a second term, and a lot of that has to do with, unless they've truly botched things, which that happens. But typically they have a platform that they can use. They have that authority platform based on what they've accomplished. And they tend to use that to kind of promote their agenda and what they've done. So,
yeah, I mean, if nothing else, if you just went with familiarity and hearing Trump's name for the last 4 years compared to really hear Biden's name for the last year, there's a big difference. It's an extra, it's 3 times the amount of familiarity.
Sure.
And, we've talked about studies before, like if you're just more familiar, you're more likely for somebody to check your name because it just looks familiar. And really, if you think about it, Trump has decades of familiarity because he was already in the public eye.
Yeah.
And the name Trump is just, synonymous with success. Although a lot of people will bash that and be like, well, he's been through bankruptcies. He's had bad businesses, but he's still a celebrity.
He is.
Before he came in. And, so that has some weight, whether it's rational or not, it doesn't matter. Like, it bypasses the brain. This guy's, success. He's got his name on buildings and resorts and everything else.
Which is a huge advantage.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
The fact that he has his own he's got a Netflix series now about, even though it doesn't paint him in a lot of the best light, but the fact is there's some, it's a Netflix series, and it goes back to his, his beginnings with his father, when he first got started in the business. It's really interesting. We've been, my wife and I, we've been going through it. I think we're on the 4th one up until like his initial run for president. But it is pretty fascinating to see his rise, some of the failures he's had along the way. But I will say that despite all of that, he can be, he's probably had several bankruptcies. He's had failed marriages and things like that, which, he's pretty, he would not deny the fact that he's had a lot of, failures throughout life. But the fact is, everybody, one of the things that we have a common friend, David, David Dutton. One of the things he told me a long time ago, he coined a phrase, and I don't know if this was original to him, but he always used to say, people love to do business. People love to what is it? They love to root for the underdog.
Yeah. Yep.
They love to root for they do business with experts, but they always love to root for the person that's the underdog.
Yeah.
And I think he's been an underdog for a long time because I think establishment people look at, how he came in to become the president back in 2016. And there was this push against the status quo of things, the way things have always been. And I think that's something that attracts people in essence. And even in this documentary series in Netflix, it talks about Jesse Ventura from when he was governor of Minnesota. He kind of set the stage for that with one of these people that are kind of outside the realm of politics who jumped in and kind of set the stage for being an outsider that came in and just said, I'm not one of the insiders, these political insiders that jump in and I'm going to make some waves. So I think Trump in the Netflix series, it shows how he learned a lot from that strategy. I think he was friends with Ventura back then and kind of learned a lot from his run as governor of Minnesota and implemented a lot of that. So,
yeah, I think he saw the same thing with, Reagan. He came out of Hollywood and he was governor for a while, and then he ran for president. Yeah. Carter was same way, on the other side. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely this appeal to the outsider shaking up the establishment, right? And it's interesting if you look at the DNC side that they have a very established person, but they're still wanting to shake up the establishment, even though they chose an establishment candidate. There's still a lot of wanting to completely change the culture. So I think that's interesting to watch how that plays out. I mean, did you watch any of the DNC?
I did. I was fascinating with it. I think
what did you see there as far as how they were talking to their people?
So I think the biggest difference is one painted a picture of hope, and I think one painted a picture of using and fear is a very persuasive in copywriting and in sales and marketing, fear can be a very persuasive way to engage, and get people to, buy in using fear. And I think that's what a lot of the DNC was composed of is like, fear of having another 4 years. What would happen? Is this the end of our country? Basically, if we have another 4 years. I think from the opposite side is that, which I expected maybe a little more fear, fear to be used in the RNC is to using maybe kind of like chaos, riots and things that, a lot of what's going on, the political or the upheaval that's going on across our nation in so many places with the unrest, racial unrest and things that are going on. I thought maybe they would possibly use fear, showing like what some of the things that are going on in like Portland and things like that. But, surprisingly, they used I came away from thinking a lot of the speakers and the people that were on the platform used hope instead of fear. So I thought that was an interesting contrast between the two. One used more fear with their side, which again is very persuasive, very powerful. One used hope. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because I think hope is beneficial. And I think that fear can be very powerful for both sides. And I think that probably some of the campaign and some of the advertising and some of the commercials, we've seen fear used on both sides. But it seemed like, I don't know, what was your impression? Do you feel like that was kind of the theme coming away from the convention this week, was more hope than fear? I
don't know. I mean, I think they have their own form of hope for a different type of society. We were talking before the show, we were talking about some of the psychological triggers from the book we were talking about a couple, I guess the last episode or 2 episodes ago, from Joe Sugarman. And one of the psychological triggers is hope, in that book. So I think both sides use their form of hope. We look at it, I think, as fear from our side, and on the other side, they look at that as hope.
Right.
So I think one person's hope is another person's fear, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I think they did use a type of hope.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you wanted to comment on that from the book. I know we talked about hope.
Yeah.
Also, I just threw out, just in case he shows up in the green room, I threw out a link to my buddy Ryan in case he wants to jump on.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if he'll respond or not, but keep an eye out on the green room.
Okay.
But yeah, so hope is talked about a lot in. He dedicates 3 or 4 pages to hope in his book on one of the psychological triggers.
Wait. Yeah, I mean, hope is like, you talk about ads. I mean, we were just talking about, so last week when we were discussing some of the, trigger ads, or some of the triggers that go into advertising, ultimately persuading people to buy, hope is one of them, because you're looking to the future. If I'm buying a golf club, am I going to shave off 3 strokes? Yeah. I mean, I can see myself being that. When you paint a picture of what I can, what I'm like on the course, shaving 3 or 4 strokes off my game. Sure. You're buying a new vehicle. What are you going to look like? Obviously in this new, Mercedes convertible, obviously I can see myself. You can paint a picture of me sitting in that car, pulling into into a client's parking lot, it's like you can paint visuals.
Right.
And so hope is, ultimately like what this will benefit, how this will benefit me. And I think that hope's very powerful. We were talking before we came on. I think Barack Obama, I think he won 2 terms in political office because he painted a picture of hope initially. I think that was massively why he won the first back in 2008.
Yeah, hope and change.
Yeah, hope and change. And so people wanted something different. We came off a pretty rough recession. And, people were looking for something different. He certainly painted a picture of what we could do and what could, things that, could be better in this country, regardless of what your politics are.
And he was also kind of an underdog, anti-establishment type candidate when he ran.
Sure.
So, that works. Like, it continues to work for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, hope is really like, hope is, it's kind of the antidote or the vaccine to fear, right? Yeah. So if you're fearful about the country going in a certain direction, and what your base is afraid of, whether it's, big corporations taking over, then you can play against that and you promise the opposite, and that creates hope, instead of fear.
Absolutely.
But it's still playing on fear, even though it's hope, because it's kind of the opposite. So it's still tapping into that fear. You're just showing them what's possible. And we've talked about this before with like Nancy Duarte's stuff with when she analyzed JFK's speech and Martin Luther's speech, and this whole like back and forth between what it is now and what it could be, what it is now, what it could be, and just how powerful that is, how powerful hope is in marketing, in persuasion, and everything.
Yeah. That speech by JFK about, putting a man on the moon.
Yeah.
By the end of the decade.
That was great. And last night in Trump's speech, he talked a little bit about that. He was talking about putting the first woman on the moon, and then he talked about we'd be the first country to Mars. Yeah. So he kind of threw out some, stuff out there, future based stuff. I didn't think he did that as well as he could have. And I don't think he's nearly as eloquent as a JFK. Right. But I thought he did put enough hope. He did put enough stuff for his base. But he used fear as well. Like he talked about, they're coming for your Second Amendment right. They're going to, all that kind of stuff, which for his base is like a big deal. That's why guns are sold out everywhere. You can't get ammo, like all kinds of stuff. Right. But there's another thing I wanted to jump to real quick. I have this book that I keep on my shelf that is really, really powerful. And it's called Words That Change Minds. We've dipped into it once or twice before. It's called Mastering the Language of Influence. Yep. And what this does, it talks about what they call working types, kind of like how our brain works and what motivates us to do work.
Sure.
So there's this right before we started, I was just flipping through it, and what it does is what's cool about the book is it will break down different, like the general population's working mindset, so to speak. So it's like, for instance, about 40% of the people are away from pain, and about 40% of the people move towards pleasure, and then about 10% are, either way. So a lot of people that have a hard time achieving goals and they find themselves just constantly in this kind of feast or famine, they're away from people. So they move just far enough away from the pain to get comfortable, and they kind of slide back to the pain, and then they move away and they slide back. Whereas towards people are always moving towards the next thing.
Sure.
And until you break that, and become a towards person, it's very difficult to kind of stay on that trajectory. So the title of this chapter is Freaked Out or Cool as a Cucumber, Working Stress Response. Yeah. So if you think about it, like this is for most people, this is like the most stressful time we've had in our lifetimes.
Sure.
Other than like the much older generation that came through, the 50s and 60s, maybe that was probably as stressful. But I don't think anything's hit globally like the pandemic and all this stuff that's going on, and just the division and the that's fueled by social media, 24-hour news cycles, all this kind of stuff. And I thought this was interesting because there's basically three areas that is the stress response, the working stress response. One is feeling, one is choice, and one is thinking. So I'll break those down in a second, but which do you think is the most powerful stress response? Like how people adapt and want to get out of like stress?
Man.
So feeling, choice, or thinking?
I'm going to say feeling.
That's what I probably would have thought too. So here's how the percentages break down.
Yeah.
15% of the population is feeling.
Yeah.
15% are thinking. That's your engineers and things like that. But 70% are motivated by choice.
Okay. Right.
So if you think about that and kind of with hope is basically choice, right? I mean, it's kind of a offshoot of hope and choice, kind of the same thing there. And like the way that you can tell some of this stuff is like, here's some like feeling, how you get people to tap into the feeling part is you get them excited about something and focus on the emotion using words such as intense, exciting, mind-boggling, extraordinary. Thinking, the other people, you present the logical facts, which we know is not, super persuasive. Everybody thinks it is, but it's really not. You give them the cold reality, the hard facts, the clear thinking, the statistics. But 70% of the population is influenced by choice. So what you would do is you would speak in terms that indicate you can go in and out of an emotional state. You can get excited about this and then realize it makes good sense too, is a phrase you might use. So if you really were to go back and look, I think you would see, both sides are tapping into that a little bit. I do think Trump did that a little bit better.
Sure.
Where he kind of is like, you could vote this way, but if you want to have the freedom to, because he talked a lot about cancel culture and things like this. And if you don't want to have to live with that, then you want to do this.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of choice, and really, I think it's one of the just like, freedom of choice. That's just almost like a founding principle of the US, right? We want people to be able to, or everybody wants to be able to choose their religion, choose how they treat their body. Even though those may be polar opposites for people, it still feels like choice.
Yeah.
And I think the more that a candidate steps into understanding that that's really what drives people is They want to feel like they have the choice to do whatever.
Yeah.
And one side, and like I said, these are usually end up being opposite just because of the way people see the world.
Mm-hmm.
But so the more you can give people choice or make them feel like they have choice, the more you can influence them to take action.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think both sides tried to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's I'm trying to see if there's any other. So yeah, so like influencing language is intense, exciting, mind-boggling, wonderful. Thinking language is clear thinking, logical, rational, cold reality, hard facts. Like these are actual words that people would say based on that, on how they see the world. And then people with choice would be looking for words like, or you would hear words like empathy, appropriate, makes good sense, and feels right.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking to somebody based on, you can tell just by the language they already use, which of those three working types they are.
Yeah.
And you think about it, like feels right is something you hear from a lot of people, and that's 70% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to try to persuade with facts. You can throw a few in there, but you will really want to get people to feel like they have choice still.
Sure.
And I think both sides did a pretty good job of that to their base. The problem is it's completely the opposite to the other side. So you're not persuading a change in any way.
That's right. That's right. So you're only influencing the people on your side, which I find it interesting that even last week during the DNC, one of the takeaways, and I didn't watch everything from it, just like I didn't watch everything from this week, but one of the key takeaways that I took from that people talked about was the empathy that Joe Biden has.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So empathy is a pretty powerful, and I would say, to their credit, if you're comparing the two, if you were saying who has more empathy, is it A, candidate A, Joe Biden, or B, Donald Trump? If you're choosing between, if your choice is empathy alone, then what? I'm just curious. So I'll give it to you. What, without giving my answer, who would you say has more empathy?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the surface, I would say Joe Biden definitely fits that. I think he's, and they played that card, right? They played the nice guy card. That's what they did.
Yep.
Because that's kind of his character. He's kind of got the grandpa look and the, the friendly guy and that kind of stuff. Whereas Trump's a little bit more hardline, a little bit more sarcastic, a little bit more, speaks his mind, more of a grumpy old guy than an empathetic guy. Right. So, but again, he knows his crowd.
Yeah, he does.
So he's got a lot more entrepreneurs and military and first responders and people who are kind of have been faced with like the hard facts or whatever. That's my take anyway.
Yeah.
So they appreciate that. Like they want the hard line.
Yeah.
They don't want the soft, leader.
Yeah. And that goes to the point where I think the question is, when people are choosing their leader, is that a quality that they want? For some, yes.
Yeah.
But for some, in negotiation settings, when you're dealing with foreign relations and things like that, some people don't want a guy that simply says, I understand how you feel,
Yeah.
They want a negotiator,
Yeah.
So it's really, like you said, it really depends on what side of the aisle you're on, and really what your I think what your framing is, because when you're dealing with foreign entities and you're dealing with foreign relations, I think that the one thing that you have to hand it to Trump is that, given the fact that he is a negotiator, there's some benefits to that. His years of negotiating in business certainly benefit him on the foreign stage. But at the same time, if you're thinking in terms of, oh my gosh, we're going to, be the laughing stock of the entire world.
Yeah. Well,
because he's not empathetic, but so.
But it's interesting as you're talking. I'm remembering like last night, the final night of the RNC, when Ivanka Trump was doing her talk and kind of leading up to her talk. And maybe they saw this in some polls or something. I don't know.
Sure.
But they had several like very, like strong stories where Trump was very empathetic to, prisoners that were wrongly, accused. I can't remember her name, but, they got, I can't remember the woman's name, but she got out of jail after 22 years. And now they're fighting for, prisoner rights basically. And Ivanka talked about how he was in the Oval Office and he got really quiet and he was very, he wanted, and she said like, he wants to, this is just the first of a lot of people that we're going to be able to help. So I think maybe, I don't know if that was already planned or if they saw the empathy play and they were like, oh, we definitely need more of that.
Right.
So let's put in some of that, and, I think everybody's using all the tactics right now, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're like 65 days or so away from the election. Everybody's going to use every cycle. I mean, the people that run these campaigns, know psychology and persuasion as well as anybody on the planet. Like we're not, they know all the stuff we've talked about. They hire the best copywriters, the best everybody.
Yeah. So we mentioned authority. What's another principle of influence that you can point out? One that comes to mind, because there's 6 principles.
Yeah.
One of the others that come to mind from this week was social proof, right?
Yeah.
Because how many people got up on stage and talked about, basically gave a testimonial for Donald Trump, from the speech by, we're both fans of Herschel Walker, I think that was Monday.
Yeah.
His background with Donald even goes back to when Donald owned, back in the 80s when he owned the USFL.
Right.
And Herschel was a player, and the relationship that he developed with him there, he talked about that intimately and said, listen, I've known this guy for, 30 something years, 35 years, and I've never seen a racist bone in his body. So, there's again, social proof, testimonials that he's implementing.
Yeah. I saw a lot of testimonial type stuff from women with Trump. Like he hires a lot of women. He puts women in positions of power. Like, all his press secretaries have been women. A lot of his people in the Trump organization are women. Like, so yeah, I think he did a really good job of that, of bringing in those stories, and a lot of people who you would not at first glance think would be Trump supporters, whether it's Hispanic or Black or whatever. They had a lot of good stories for that as well.
Yeah.
Of people who flipped. Like there was a lot of, especially last night, the final night, there's a lot of I used to be a Democrat, but this is the first time I'm going to vote for Trump.
Right. Which is that's very powerful too. When people see stuff like that.
Right. So, I think they did a good job there of like really showing people like it's okay to change your mind.
And to be fair, that the Democrats did the same thing last week. They had former Republicans.
Yeah.
That had flipped to
to
the Democrats, and you actually saw some former Republicans speaking in favor of Joe Biden. So it's worked in both. Both sides use that. That tactic. So it's those are things that are very persuasive. But yeah, it's interesting to look at. Again, it's all showmanship and it's all theater, but it's interesting to watch. At the end of the day, it's fascinating to see some of these principles, Cialdini's principles, because politics study Cialdini, right? Political parties, political campaigns study Cialdini like crazy.
They hire him.
Yeah, they sure do.
Company and all that, all that stuff. So I think what we're saying is at the end of the day, the conventions didn't do anything for anybody. Except, like you said, probably a little bit of a bump, get people fired up for their own candidate.
Right.
But from a persuasion standpoint, and I guess that's important though, right? You still have to persuade your people to stay involved.
Well, it's commitment and consistency. The other the other principle of persuasion, which is, people want to be, they want proof. They want to confirm what they already believe, and they need that confirmation. And did they get it? Yeah, they get it.
On both sides. Now they've got
both sides.
now they've got these stories of
Sure.
Democrats that flip to Republican and Republicans that are flipping to Democrats.
Right.
Like they've all got their little stories that they can go on Facebook with and like bash each other with now. So
did you see this? This just confirms it. I mean, this just proves it. Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
What are you, stupid?
So you've got these, these two factions, and they're totally now, once you come away from this, they're just more entrenched than ever.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're basically the job from that point on is really to, once you've solidified and convinced and really kind of firmed up your base, now it's all about going out and really putting the message out there to the people.
Who can get the most people from their base to show up and vote?
Exactly.
That's the bottom line.
And I'll leave it with this from a persuasion marketing standpoint. I had a friend that reached out to me this week. We differ on politics. But I told him, I said, listen, from an enthusiastic standpoint, it's no competition right now. And I'm sorry for you, but there is no enthusiasm for Joe Biden. And that's a disaster. That spells disaster, for your candidate. And that's, Obama, like we said, hope and change, enthusiasm, charismatic.
That's a great point. People were voting for Obama.
Absolutely.
And now people are voting against Trump on that side, which is not the same thing.
It's just not.
Right. It's like,
it's hard to get people, because what's happening is a lot of people say, yeah, I hate Trump and I'm going to vote against him. But what happens is, and if you study what actually happens in polling and in voting, there's a lot of polls out there. A lot of polls poll people that say one thing and don't do anything, right? So you have polls of like voters, likely voters, and then you have polls of registered voters and then likely voters. Well, those are two different things when it comes to polling, and most pollsters will tell you totally different. From a registered voter to someone who's a likely voter, because there's a lot of registered voters out there that just total apathy when it comes to it, unless there's someone that excites them. Yeah,
they just check the box when they got their driver's license.
Right.
So that's taken care of if they ever want to vote, right?
Sure.
So, all right. Well, another good week of
another short episode. There we go.
Another good week of persuasion talk. A couple beers down.
Yep. Exactly.
And now it's the weekend. That's a good way to end the weekend.
That's right.
Or start the weekend, I guess.
So any lesson that people can take away from this is not just politics, but if you want to persuade people, persuade them to what they, like we've talked about, don't persuade them against what they already, what they're already engaged with, or what they're already interested in. Find out what they're interested in, and kind of, persuasion's all about ultimately, matching up what people are already inclined to do. Right.
Yeah. Make it a pep rally, not trying to flip them.
Exactly.
And
Absolutely.
I think that's the most effective way to do it. Like,
just
talk to them about what they already believe, help them support their own beliefs.
Yeah.
So that you have a strong kind of army of people behind you, that strong base, and whoever gets the most people out in the election, that's who's going to win.
That's right. And by the way, we predicted, I think like 5 months ago, landslide. I think we still think that.
Yeah, some of the latest. One of the guys who has a really accurate history on these things. I mean, the gap is getting wider for Trump, which worries me, because then the other side gets riled up and gets fearful, so they turn out more. So you just don't know until it actually happens.
You don't know, but it's fun. It's fun to talk about.
Yeah.
So as always, you can find us persuasionbythepint.com. You can find us on all of your social media platforms. Guys, thanks again for listening. We enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.